Hey there, fellow citizens of the internet. Welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Today I have with me Chris Donaldson. I hope I did not butcher the name there. And he's going to be talking about his motorcycle riding experience across the world and what that journey has taught him. So without any further ado, Chris, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Thank you, Moses. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So first of all, I do not know how to ride a motorcycle. So my experience as far as riding motorcycles has to do with, actually, I did ride a motorcycle once. Maybe I shouldn't say this on a podcast, but I had one too many to drink. And a friend of mine, he had a motorcycle. He knows how to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And there was just a bunch of us guys, and none of us, had ever ridden a bike. But I didn't say that. I was like, of course I know how to ride a bike. I got on it, and I did ride it, and for 10 feet, and I celebrated that I was able to ride a motorcycle without ever, having the formal training.
Yeah.
And my form of celebration was to climb the roof of a house, and in doing so, I injured my leg, and I still have the scar to show for that. So, but that's the beginning and the end of my motorcycling experience.
We were all young and silly. We were all young and silly one time.
Yeah. So speaking of which, how old were you when you first started riding a motorcycle?
I was about 16 as well. Got my first bike, BSA Bantam, which was a little old crash thing, and I fixed it up and did it up because at 17 you're not allowed to ride a bike on the road till 17. So I suppose that was the start of it. But my motorcycle, my book and my story, I suppose, is not so much about motorcycles; it's about life itself. The motorcycle was really just a way to get me through life. So even like taking a bus is the way to get to school or university. It's just a part of the journey. Motorcycles are great for getting to know people because everybody has an experience with a motorcycle. They usually like them or hate them or whatever, but they're an emotive form of transport. So if you want to get to talking to people, get to know people, it's a great way to sort of ride up in a motorcycle and it's a great sort of topic of conversation then. When I was 21, I decided to ride a bike to Australia. I wanted to go to Australia because I'd been brought up in Northern Ireland, which wasn't the best place to be brought up in the 60s and 70s, with bombs going off and people getting shot on a regular basis. So I decided, like a lot of other ones, to get out of town. And I left in October 1979, which was just before the American embassy got taken over in Tehran, and the Islamic Revolution started in Iran. So that sort of stopped my planned journey to Australia, which I've been planning for 3 or 4 years. So I ended up riding across the Sahara, through the Middle East, across the Sahara, and ended up in Cape Town, just in the middle of apartheid. Stayed there for a while, took a sailing yacht back to Europe. I got over to the States, rode around Canada, States, and then through Central America down to Argentina. Hence the name of my book, Going the Wrong Way, because I went to every country apart from Australia practically. But when I realised, looking back on the journey, going the wrong way was not so much just the geography of the trip, it was also a lot of the things I did were sort of off the beaten path, down the road less travelled, whichever way you want to talk about it. And it's basically making your own way through the world rather than following your parents and your teachers and what not everybody's told you to do. And through that became a bit of a coming of age story, I suppose, rather than anything else. And then the interesting about the book is I started writing it when I was about 22. Just came back from a journey. And then I got 22 years old. It's hard to concentrate on any one thing, and wasn't thinking I was a great writer. So I sort of put all the stuff in the bottom drawer and forgot about it until about 3 years ago. And I thought, I really should get the story down because it could be interesting to a lot of people. So the unusual, I suppose, from a writing point of view, I started writing a book in 1980 and I finished it in 2001. So I was able to go back into my thoughts as a young man and what I was doing and what I was thinking as a young man just starting into the work, family, life scaling. I'm able to finish the book when I'm now 65, 66, and use the experience of all that I've done in between to sort of put a different aspiration to the book. I think I've done something right. It's got over 1,300 5-star reviews on Amazon, so it seems to be, I've hit the nail on the head as far as a lot of people are concerned, as far as coming of
Wow,
age
amazing.
and traveling.
Yeah. Huh. Well, so just to go to the beginning there, as you were talking about how you started writing, and what made you think that you could actually do that? Like what influenced you? Because I feel like the average individual is not even entertaining the possibility of riding a motorcycle across their own country, let alone across a continent or two. Like what made you think that was a thing that was possible for you? And like, what were you influenced by someone at all, or like how did that happen?
Well, funnily enough, I was reading a motorcycle book in school one time. I was only about 16 or 17. And I read a story about a lady who had been riding around the world on a BSA Bantam, which is the same model of motorbike that I had to start it off. And I basically thought, if a girl can do this with very little experience, then it's something I can do as well. And that was back in about 1976 or something like that. And in between, a lot of things happened in between, but I went to a motorcycle exhibition or festival a couple of years ago. And there was a lady up on the stage talking about how she'd ridden a BSA Bantam around the world. When I got talking to her after her talk, we would work out that it was the same girl, same lady. She was a girl, she was only about 25,
Wow.
and she was then about 80. So the world is a small place and you can just bump into somebody by chance, you know. So I blamed it on her. she got me into trouble.
Yeah.
She'd been riding around the world for about 15 years. I only had a year and a half. But yeah, I didn't take a BSA Bantam. I took a Moto Guzzi Le Mans, which is an equally daft motorcycle to take around the world because it's a cafe racer. It's more made for Italian and autoroutes rather than deserts and dirt roads.
Yeah. Well, okay. So before we get a little bit deeper into the journey here, could you give us like a slight glimpse into your family dynamics? Like, are you the only kid? Do you have siblings? What was the family or the home life like?
Well, there was
before you set out on the ride.
4 kids in our family. Most of us were brought up in Belfast, and as I say, it was a strange place to get brought up because I've 2 kids now, 2 girls, and I wouldn't have sent them to school in the middle of Belfast when there's bombs going off and stuff like that going on. But my parents got used to it, and I got used to it as well. It probably gave me a good grounding for traveling around the world to places like Uganda and Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, places like that, and Colombia in the 80s. I was sort of used to seeing policemen walking around with guns and stuff like that going on. But I didn't have a bad upbringing, but I just always had a wanderlust, I suppose, to see the world and to see it on my own. And the motorbike's a great way of doing it because, as I say, if you stop beside the road, people will come over and talk to you, whereas if you're in a car, you've got a door and a window in front of you or between you and what's going on outside. So people ignore you more. And being on my own, if you go to a restaurant or bar or coffee shop on your own, you're gonna meet people going to talk to you. Whereas if they see 3 or 4 people, you're a group, you're isolated already from what's going on. So if you want to travel the world and learn about cultures, learn about peoples, how they get on, it's much better to do it on your own. It's a little bit more dangerous as well, a bit more difficult, certainly. But you also learn about yourself as well because there's nobody else to annoy you. There's nobody else to blame when things go wrong. You've got to get in there. You've got to get whatever trouble you're in sorted out. You've got to do it yourself.
Yeah. And were you discouraged to take on such a trip when you first started, like from your parents, friends, like, or was it something that?
Well, my parents thought it was nuts, probably. Yeah, no, they weren't terribly keen on it. Because in those days, there was no internet when I went
Right,
You go
right.
away nowadays, anywhere in the world, you can take your mobile phone, get online, and phone home on WhatsApp or messaging or whatever. You're
Yep.
never out of touch. Whereas when I went down Africa,
Mm,
I think it took me about 6 months, and I spoke to my parents at home, I think twice, because it was so expensive to make an international
right.
call in those days. And I
Yeah.
remember phoning from
Yeah.
Egypt and trying to call through. It took me a day to book the phone. Pay was about £5, probably about $50 in today's money for like a 5 minute call
Wow.
to home. So I did that once, and I don't want to do that again because all it did was make me homesick a bit. So I decided to
Yeah.
just go on my own now. But yeah, as a parent now, I think my mother must have been going mad.
Hmm. Yeah. Most parents would probably think the same, especially given the age that you were in. Um, and so but you were not discouraged or encouraged. They just thought, okay, you kind of nuts, but you have your mind set onto something, and we know that you're gonna go for it. Um,
Well, I
was
think
that
my
was that
parents
is that like
knew. Yeah, my parents knew that I'm not the sort of guy who can be persuaded. Once I set my mind to
yeah,
something, I'll go and do it.
yeah,
In fact, now that I think about it, my
okay,
mum actually offered to buy me a car if I sold the motorbike.
yeah,
So that was
yeah,
bribery,
figured,
corruption in my family.
yeah,
But of
yeah,
course, young kids, if you're 21, you think you can do anything. You think you're invincible. Nothing bad is going
yeah.
to happen to you. So you think you're all those things that you're unstoppable.
Mm, mm. Has that way of looking at things changed since then? So have you mellowed out in the sense that if you set your mind to something now, you go through certain amount of checks before you take action to it, like before you were just, I want to do this and you go for it, or that's still the
Well,
same.
I learned a lot about myself, about being motivated and being obstinate, probably as much as anything else. And if you want to get through something, you need to try and try again. If you do that, you can do whatever you like. But certainly, there's been times in my working life that I was up against banks or people against me trying to put me out of business. And I remember thinking, if I can drive a motorcycle across the Sahara Desert, I can sort out these guys. So it certainly gave
Mm,
me a
mm,
confidence that I could use in other times in my life rather than just traveling on a motorbike. I
yeah.
was going to say yes. Well, one of the parts of the story, I suppose, now is that whenever people had read my book, one of my mates said to me, "We never actually got to Australia on your motorbike. Why not have another go?" So the two of us set off just
Mm,
after COVID to ride a motorbike, ride his and his as well, to ride to Australia. He gave up when we got to Greece and came home again. So I
mm,
started
mm,
realizing it's not for everybody. It's not taking risks, taking your life in your hands. It's not that sensible. But
yeah.
I got there last year. So finally, after leaving Belfast to get to Australia in 1979, I finally got there in 2003. Sort of 40 years later,
Wow.
44 years later. So
Yeah.
quite a long trip.
Yeah.
But it was nice because I actually had the original motorbike I had at that stage as well, the same bike. And obviously I was the same guy,
Wow.
but the bike and
Yeah.
myself were just that much older. I think with a combined age of about 110 between us. But
Mm,
I wanted to prove the point that just because you're getting old doesn't mean you shouldn't do things that are exciting, things that are motivational, things that you can get a lot out of. I
right.
have a lot of friends who got taken early retirement, and some of them just sit and watch TV all day. Other ones play a couple of games of golf, but they don't really achieve anything. They're just waiting for the end of the road, the
Mm,
end of their journey. I think sometimes, and I
yeah.
know
Yeah.
how it feels when you get older. You don't have as much energy as you used to have, so it's hard to get motivated to do things. But one of the points I wanted to prove is you can. I mean, I didn't think I could ride a
Mm,
motorbike for 15 hours a day and go through countries like Pakistan, Iran, and India, but you can do it if you
right.
put your mind to it.
Yeah, yeah. And so any major injuries? I know that like motorcycle riding and injuries they go like hand in hand. So any major injuries during your travels?
No, well, when I got to South America, I got hepatitis in Bolivia, which is
Okay.
pretty crap because you're too tired to ride a motorbike. All you could do is sit around, so it sort of knocked me back, but it wasn't so much motorcycle injured. I think I'm probably not bad at riding a motorbike. I don't really fall off very much. Touch wood, but I'm not worried about saying something like that. But yeah, I mean, places like India, Pakistan, the driving is just nuts. You just think that people are trying to knock you off all the time. And if you ride or drive with a sort of the knowledge that everybody in the road is trying to kill you, you sort of get a bit paranoid, certainly, but it does keep you away from trouble.
Okay.
So I've never actually injured myself on the bike, but I do think it's probably luck as much to do with that as anything else.
That's amazing, because that's I just got back from we were in Jamaica, and I swore that before leaving Jamaica I was going to learn how to ride a motorcycle. I didn't, but the fear of being injured on a motorcycle just goes way up whenever I think about riding a motorcycle. So the fact that you've been riding for so long with no injuries, that's a huge testament to, well, I suppose professionalism at this level. I don't know how to call it, but, or is it overcautiousness? Like, what do you credit your safety to?
Well, they say there's anybody can eat an elephant, but you just have to do it very slowly, one bite at a time, and it's a wee bit like that. You have to start off every day on the motorbike thinking, I'm not going to fall off today. I'm not going to fall off in the next half hour and the next hour every time I go on and move. Just say to yourself, I'm not going to fall off. And if you think that you're only going to drive down to the shops or whatever, you know you can do that without falling off because you've done it every day. So it was purely a method of changing the destination. Just say, I'm going to drive to Lahore today. I'm not going to fall off. And by doing that, they certainly build up as I say, probably a paranoia to keep yourself away from trouble. But a few dodgy times certainly, but nothing tremendously bad.
And so slight shift here in topic. Languages. So I'm assuming here that one of the things that facilitated your cross-country adventures was the ability to speak English. Is that a fair assumption?
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, certainly from the UK down through Europe, the Middle East, and then down through Africa. Yeah. All the African states would have had English as a primary language in the colonial times, and so we're probably lucky to have that. When I got to South America, obviously nobody spoke English, it was all Spanish. So the crash course of learning Spanish. I didn't have to learn everything in Spanish, just motorcycle related things. Where am I? That sort of thing. How do we get to such and such a time? Where's petrol? So that was spent about 6 months in Central and South America, and it started off, all I could say was Dos Cerveza. Just 2 beers, please.
Okay, yeah. That's all you need.
And then crossing to Australia, crossing to India, a lot of the countries would have had English as the first language as well. And
so, I was going to say that if you removed English from the equation, do you think that would have negatively impacted your desire to hit the road, or your ability to actually hit the road because of that linguistic barrier, or it's a mentality thing first and foremost?
I think it's a mentality thing. Anybody, if you keep talking to somebody or communicating with somebody on the side of the road, and he doesn't speak English and you don't speak their language, you can actually still, through hand signals and maps and whatever, and of course you could Google Translate now, which is even more so. You could always communicate in some way. No, that's never been so much a problem. Just keeping the bike safe is the main thing, and the reason you didn't want to fall off basically is if you do fall off, you could injure yourself, which would be the end of the journey, or you could break something on the bike, which equally would be the end of the journey as well. So you're careful. You don't drive like I used to when I was 18. You know.
Would you encourage your kids to go on a motorcycle journey across the world today?
No, I've got 2 daughters, and I hope they don't meet anybody like me.
Okay. Oh. Well, okay. So, yeah, that's interesting. Well,
I know.
when
I do know. I have been very lucky in just driving, but lots of times in life as well, taking risks that probably shouldn't have. But I think that's where a lot of the fun is. I think it's in. I think a lot of kids now are too locked up with health and safety and risk assessment and not hurting yourself, not doing anything that's could be dangerous because whatever the society now doesn't want us to do things like that. Society wants us to follow the line, follow do what everybody's telling you to do. Whereas if you go in a motorbike on your own, you're definitely not doing that.
Yeah. That's probably, well, I'm only 30, so I don't know what I'm talking about yet, but I feel like that's probably been a thing for a very, very long time, right? So, meaning for every 2 or 3 generations, the younger generation seems to have it easier than the older generation. And I don't know how to solve for that problem, if I can call it a problem, in that you always want a better life for your offsprings than you had, right?
Yeah,
but it seems that one of the consequences of doing that is, well, they end up not having to face the same hardships as you did, which makes them weaker. I don't. It just becomes this thing that 3-4 generations down the road.
I think you're absolutely
by
right.
design.
Yeah, and a lot of it you can blame it to parents. Parents blame the kids for screwing up or doing the wrong thing, but actually a lot of that can go back to the parents that have either not given them attention enough or given them too much attention and given them everything they want. I'm not too sure as a parent why you want to do that, because as you say, if you give a kid everything he wants without having to work for it, he's not going to appreciate what he has, and he's never going to work for it. He's going to be taking it. And he's going to be, once he leaves home and leaves school, whatever, he's going to expect the rest of the world to give him things. So you're not doing your kids any favor by bringing them up like that.
I agree. And so, what would you say was one of the hardest things that you had to work for during your trip?
Well, probably money was the main thing, because I left to go to Australia, which should have taken 3 or 4 months. But I was on the road for a year and a half. And I did stop to work a couple of times along the way, but really I was living on the shoestrings most of the time. And I've been sort of brought up as a middle class kid, I suppose, without too much hardship. But living in places like the Third World and Africa and South America with very restricted money and no way to get back, to get more money. It's different these days. You got your credit card, you got online banking. It's all very easy to transfer money and so on. But in those days, you didn't have any money on you. That was it. You couldn't buy anything. You couldn't eat anything. So it was quite transformative from that point of view. But when I went travelling a couple of years ago to Australia, I had enough money to go to hotels, to buy decent food, and that's what made a huge difference for me. Made it a lot easier.
Okay. So as you were writing that, as you were saying that, I was writing this question that I didn't get to finish, but I was thinking, what role would you say that curiosity plays in succeeding in life in general? Because it sounds like to me that this entire journey, removing motorcycle from the equation, it doesn't matter. Like you can replace the motorcycle with anything else. I feel like the underlying driving force or spirit, for lack of a better word, is curiosity. One, am I correct in that assumption? And if I am, like what role does curiosity play in life?
Well, it should play a lot of your life, because once you stop being curious, once you stop trying to learn something, I think you're effectively pretty much dead anyway, because you're not using your brain anymore. But as well as that, I always felt that we were being, at the risk of being a conspiracy theorist, I always thought we were in the basis of life's the basic governments are telling you what to do, who you like, and who are good, what's good and what's bad. I mean, you could take today, for instance, we're told that the Russians are really bad because they've started this war, but I've been to Russia several times on business, and people have been as friendly as there's nicest people here. It's not the people that are bad, it's just the governments. Obviously Russians are now getting told to terrible things about the West, so the war.
Right.
Um, and the same with Iran. I mean, I got to Iran, stopped me going around the world, stopped my journey 40 years ago. I finally got there, as I say, a couple of years ago on the trip. And the Iranian people are part of some of the friendliest people I've met along the way. But yet we're told in the West that they're the bad guys and wants to be watched. But when you meet the guys themselves, they just want to be friendly and show you around their countryside and bring you back to their home to meet their family. And it's the same nice people as you would meet anywhere. So I think it's good to give yourself a grounding that things aren't all what they seem.
Yeah. So curiosity in this case is what drives you to explore outside of the picture that is constantly being painted for you by your society / the people around you. And so I think that's how I would rephrase what you just said. But then how does exploration enter the equation, right? Because most of us can be curious, and I feel like this might be like a sad statement to say, but like the graveyards are full of curiosities that were not explored.
Yeah.
So you can be curious of something, but then never taking that first step to actually explore that curiosity. So can you give us a little bit of what your trip was like, as far as being able to explore these different curiosities that helped you become the young man that you are today?
I'm not a young man anymore. That was in the book. I'm not a pensioner. I think it keeps you alive. As I say, being a certain age now, whenever you do stop trying to learn about things, whether it's just doing something to drive a motorbike or fly an airplane, whatever it is, once you stop the desire to learn, is you just stagnate. I think you don't achieve anything. I don't really ever want to retire as such, because I think when you do retire, I mean, I've met people like doctors and people with high stressful travel or jobs. Whenever they retire, they put so much into their job and their family, they have nothing to do and no interests. So you find, especially men, they've been very driven by their work and they're seen as a such and such profession. Once they lose that, they lose all interest in life, I think, very often. So part of my journey was to try and show people that it doesn't have to be like that. You can do, I actually did exactly what I did when I was 21, when I was 62. So if that's not proof that you can do what you did when you were younger, I don't know what is. The fact that they did it on the same motorcycle, which is over 40 years old as well. But I think you've got to motivate yourself, and it does get harder when you get older because you have less energy for these things. You want to go to bed earlier. And when I was 21, I could ride a motorbike all day and then park up and go and party all night. Whereas this trip, I could ride the motorbike all day still, but I didn't want to go to any parties. I just wanted to go to bed with a good book, Yeah. So it is difficult, but it can be done. You just got to have the motivation, and you're meeting new people, learning new cultures, putting yourself into positions that you didn't know was going to happen, which is probably one of the most difficult things these days, because with the internet, all knowledge is available for us. We want to know where the next city is, where the best restaurant is, where's another petrol station. It's all there, you just have to look it up. Whereas the first journey was probably the last explorer, if you like, to go without having that benefit of knowledge in front of you. You just had to read your map and maybe a guidebook, and everything else. Your map and guidebooks are out of date from whenever they're printed, so it's much more exciting. It was much more exciting in a way,
Yeah. Well, quick question then. I don't think I asked this at the beginning. What motorcycle do you ride? Like, what's the make and model?
Well, you're in Italy, so you should know what a Moto Guzzi Le Mans is, or Moto Guzzi. A lot of Italian cops would ride Moto Guzzis. They're basically Italian's version of BMW. Only BMWs are more made for travel, for long distance travel. Like my Le Mans was very much a sportster, which is like Ferrari of the motorcycle world, going fast and furious sort of thing, rather than delivering on across the desert or traveling
Mm.
touring wise. But when I took the bike away, people laughed and said, "Oh, that's not the right bike you should take." But it never let me down. It kept
Mm.
going. And
Okay.
as I say, even 40 years later, it's still doing the job. It's very often you don't have
Wow.
to. I think if you're into cars as well, I suppose people like to buy a car as if it's or a motorbike as if it's got a special job to do. So it's part of their image. They want to be an off-roader or cafe racer or sports
Mm.
bike,
Mm.
whatever. There's always they see the bike as part of their personality, which really, as I
Yeah.
say, it's just a tool to get you where you want to go. And you want it reliable,
Yeah.
and you want to. There's obviously a lot of characters. Bikes are quite. Um, we've got more character than cars have these days because cars are all much the same. Sometimes you can't see the difference in a car apart from the name badge.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. 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 Hmm. And wait, so did you become a motorcycle mechanic because of all the breaking down, maybe, or not at all?
Well, there's a fair bit of not so much breaking down, but things getting smashed. The suspension got smashed crossing the desert,
Right.
and other things
Right.
got broken along the way. And yeah, I'd done a little bit
Yeah.
of putting things together myself before, but I certainly was a bit of an expert at the end of it. Um, Again, it's much easier with the older machines because you just left my car in to get the electrics sorted out, and the guy can't do it. You need a computer to set the timing and everything else in the car now to fix it. If you don't have that, if you don't have a specialist's workshop, you can't fix it. Whereas a 40-year-old motorbike,
Mm.
it's pre-digital. You can fix it with a screwdriver and a few spanners and a bit of experience
Yeah.
what to do with them. But you can fix them. Whereas um, machines these days, bikes and cars, nobody fixes them. If a bit breaks in it, they just throw it out and replace it. It's like a fridge. If your
Yeah.
fridge breaks down anymore these days, it would cost more to try and fix it than it would be just to throw it out and get a new one. So you don't have
Yeah.
mechanics anymore. All you do is people who unbolt things. You have people who unbolt things and bolt them back on again when they get a new one.
Yeah, we had a similar experience we owned an RV from 1985. And when we broke down in Morocco, or when we had a part that needed to be made, and well, it's 1985. You don't have to have like specialized mechanic tools or anything like that. You don't have to be licensed on that particular part. You don't have to deal with computers. You don't have to do
Yeah.
anything like that. So we just went to our local mechanics, and they just took some measurements, took a couple pieces of steel and copper this and wood that, and banged them together, and voila,
Yeah. There you go.
it worked. To where I feel like, yeah, the newer ones you would have to call the OEM, and then they gotta check with the original parts and this and that, and so that's a whole different story there. But I got two more questions here for you, and then the first one has to do with probably people that are your age, which is, and you already yapped at this for a bit now. What are some tips that you can give? Because the reason I'm gonna ask this question is because I watched this TED Talk a while back, and it was an older man, probably in his mid 60s, maybe mid 70s, and the talk. I cannot give the credit because I do not remember who was giving this talk, but it was a tip on how to retire, and what he was addressing was most people have this timeline of when they want to retire, and they look forward to it so much that when that time comes, they celebrate, of course, right? 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 months, 9 months, all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I did not plan to not have anything in my hands for 9 months, for a year, and nowadays you might have like 20 more years, 25, 30 years after your retirement, and they didn't plan for that long. It becomes like retirement becomes a problem. So I'm nowhere near that, but I figured I'm having a conversation with you now, and I feel like I could ask you that. What are some practical tips that you can give to old people or people that are getting really close to retiring, on well, how do you actually retire without losing the purpose, or without feeling like you've lost your purpose?
Yeah, well, that's the important bit, I think. And when a man, or especially girl as well, woman as well. If your work has been a main focus in your life,
Yeah.
once that's gone, you need to have something else to focus on. You probably didn't realize that you actually enjoyed your work much more than you think you did. Um, and then, they do take their job as a part of their personality, whereas women are much more together. Generally, very much a sort of general impetus, but women much more family orientated, much better communicators than guys are. We tend to just keep everything into ourselves and not be as open as women are. So you do when you get to the retirement stage, if you're not careful, unless you've had other hobbies and stuff which you can focus on, it is a good fault, like walking off a cliff as such, because the world is forever different. Which is an awful shame, because people have been working for 40 years, 40 hours a week, and they get to the retirement stage, and hopefully they have some money gathered together. But I think a lot of the problem is people can't motivate themselves to do things, which is an awful waste of a life, because in a way it should be the time of your life. Not people say, oh, you're young. When you're young, it's the time of your life, but it should be the same when you're retired or at that stage, because you should have the time to do what you want. Your family are away, you're grown up, so you don't have to stay stuck with that time and expense all the time, and you don't have to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be having a time of your life, and if you're not, you should get back to the drawing board and see where you've gone wrong, because this is it. There's nothing after being old. It's the end of the journey when you're dead,
Yeah, yeah. And so, and now the opposite question, I guess not the opposite question, but for young people, what would be your old man's advice for young people?
Ignore what you've been told for the last 20 years, and instead of saying why I shouldn't be able to do this, say why I should do it, and get off your ass and just do it,
I like that.
I think kids, as I say, they've been taught, as you were saying earlier about parents saying kids have an easy time, whatever, one generation. But the last generation has been making kids' lives so easy and so distant from reality. Everybody wants to sit on their mobile phones all day and Google, Facebook and Instagram. You get off your ass and go and actually take part in life rather than just watching other people doing it. I think it's the best. At the risk of sounding like a grumpy old man.
No. And I guess I lied about that being the last question. I guess I have two more questions. One, as far back as you can remember, what is your absolute earliest memory? Like the very first memory that comes to mind?
I don't think that's a very hard question to know, because I do remember things. I think I remember things when I was 4 or 5, or earlier than that even.
Okay.
But whenever you get your old photographs, your parents' old photographs of sitting in the garden or whatever, one time someone wondered, do you actually remember it at all, or is it just a photograph that you just sort of you're thinking of? But your mind works in strange ways. As I say, I wrote my book, started writing it 40 years ago, and I was amazed that when I started writing a couple of years ago, I was able to read this manuscript and remember things that were happening then, and then I got my photographs out and saw the photographs and said, yeah, God, I remember that. I thought I'd forgotten all about it, but it was still in the back of my brain somewhere there. And then when I started writing it down and putting it as part of the story, more comes back. You can remember what you were doing and what's going on at the time. So the brain is it's not a definite tool, but it's all the information is in there. You just have to scrape off years of socializing and drinking too much to find out if you still remember it or not.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate to that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm going through the process of writing every single memory that I have,
Right.
and so far I've covered about 21 years. And the thing is, though, the more that I write, the more that I remember. So it's
Exactly.
for better or for worse, right? Because the worst part is like, oh man, I want to get done, but then at the same time, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just remembered this. And sometimes it can just be a sound. Sometimes it can be a smell that reminds you of something from like 2 decades ago. So
That's right.
I need to have a conversation with a neuroscientist or something to figure out, where exactly these memories are stored. But last question for you then. Is it too late to start over?
I don't think so. I think anybody certainly when they're retiring, they're going to have to start all over again because that's the stage that you're at.
Mm.
It depends on your attitude in life, I guess. Everybody
Yeah.
thinks their way of doing things is right, but um, I think it certainly was a groundbreaking trip I made when I was 21. Not many old people do, but they do other things, and people don't have to. I'm not saying everybody has to go and ride around the world on a motorbike, but just open your brain,
Mm.
open your plans, open your wallet, and
Yeah.
get out there and learn something. Have a good time at the same time.
Mm. Have a good time at the same time. Chris Donaldson, thank you so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. It's been a pleasure of mine. What is the name of your book?
The book's called Going the Wrong Way, and it's available on my website, Chris.Donaldson, or chrisdonaldson.world. But probably the best place to buy it is on Amazon. It's an audiobook, ebook, and paperback. And
Okay.
Amazon's one of those companies we hate using because they're putting everybody else out of business. But it is amazing
Okay.
that a guy in Belfast can write a book and have it distributed all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Good time to be alive. That's for sure.
It
That's
tends
for
to
sure.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. You have such an amazing story. I've never ridden a bicycle, motorcycle, but I have it as a goal to be able to ride a motorcycle for sure. And hopefully I can have you back on the podcast at some point if it all goes well.
Hope so. Nice to meet you.
Good talking to you.